first time people noticed what Harlan Voss was doing, most figured he'd finally gone eccentric. For 3 weeks that April, his property on the south end of Garner County was filled with the grinding roar of a rented excavator. Neighbors driving past on County Road 7 would slow their trucks and squint. A few pulled over entirely. They expected to see him prepping a new field, maybe pushing back the tree line to expand his east pasture. Harlan had been farming that land for 43 years. There was always something being improved, but he was digging a hole. Massive, deliberate, carefully graded, right in the middle of 60 acres that used to grow some of the finest soybeans in the county. By the time word reached the feed store, the excavation was the size of a football field and deep enough to swallow a man whole. Most of Garner County had already drawn the same conclusion. "He's building himself a fishing pond," said Dale Pruitt, who farmed the cattle operation next door. "Man works his whole life and retires into a bass pond. Can't say I blame him." There were quiet laughs, a few raised eyebrows. People shrugged and moved on. Before that summer was over, many of those same neighbors would wish they had dug one of their own. If stories about quiet wisdom and the people who keep our farms alive mean something to you, subscribe and join us here. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to know which corner of the world you're calling home. Harlan Voss was not the kind of man who explained himself. He was 71 years old, and he had grown up on that land in Garner County, inherited it from his father, and spent 4 decades coaxing crops from soil that could be generous one year and punishing the next. Lean, slow-moving, with sun-darkened hands, and the habit of watching the sky the way other men watch their phones. He wasn't the loudest man at the co-op meetings, but when he spoke, people listened. He'd planted cover crops before they were fashionable, and rotated his fields before anyone called it sustainable. He didn't have much interest in defending his decisions. If a thing made sense, he did it. If not, he stopped. So, when people asked him what he was building, he gave the same answer every time. "A pond," he said. And that was all he said. Dale Pruitt was the first to voice real skepticism. He ran 300 head of black Angus on the land next door and had watched the excavation grow for 2 weeks before walking over. "You're pulling productive ground out of rotation," Dale said. "That's good loam down there." Harlan nodded. "It is." Dale waited for more. Nothing came. Over at the Garner County Feed and Supply, Bud Eckerman, who serviced half the farm equipment in the county, shook his head over his coffee. "That excavator rental alone is going to run him $6,000–7,000, Bud said. "And for what?" Maxine Trotter, who had managed the store for 30 years, was more measured. "Harlan's done things that didn't make sense before," she said quietly. "And then they did." Gerald Fitch, a retired conservation officer, looked out the window. "He's sizing it like a reservoir, not a fishing pond. That thing's going to hold a lot of water." No one paid much attention to Gerald at the time. What most people in Garner County didn't know was what Harlan Voss had lived through in the summer of 1988. He'd been farming for 15 years by then, and that dry season nearly ended everything. Wells dropped, ponds dried to cracked mud. He hauled water by hand for his livestock for 11 weeks straight and lost 20% of his crop. The debt took 4 years to clear. He swore then that he'd never be caught like that again. In the years that followed, he attended water management workshops, read university bulletins on watershed hydrology, and drove 4 hours to visit a farmer named Eugene Stall, who had built a series of ponds in the 1970s that kept his operation alive through droughts that broke his neighbors. Eugene had shown him what never left, that a properly sited pond could carry an operation through months of dry conditions. Harlan had been waiting for the right moment for more than 30 years. He never explained any of this. People hadn't asked. The project did not go smoothly. The excavator hit heavy clay 12 feet down, burning 2 extra days. Then a hydraulic line broke and the machine sat idle for nearly a week, waiting on a part from out of state. His daughter Renee drove out one Saturday with a look on her face that Harlan recognized from her mother. "Dad," the bank called, "you're into the operating line further than they're comfortable with." "I know," he said. "What are you going to tell them?" He looked at the pond, half-finished, waterless, raw-edged in the spring sun. The truth. The bank approved a short extension reluctantly. Harlan finished the excavation himself, grading shallow channels along the slope to direct runoff straight into the basin without a single pump or power line. No pumps, no power, just gravity and planning. What Harlan had built was what agricultural engineers call an on-farm reservoir, a farm pond sized not for recreation, but for survival. A properly constructed farm pond captures surface runoff, rainwater, and snowmelt that would otherwise drain away or evaporate. Positioned at the low point of a watershed, it can store millions of gallons over a wet season, then supply livestock through summer, feed gravity drip irrigation lines, and recharge the water table around it. The key is scale. A pond too small fills and spills, wasting what it catches. A pond correctly sized to its watershed captures. Maxine Trotter put a copy of that report on the counter at the feed store. Harlan never said he told anyone so. That wasn't the kind of man he was. But when young farmers stopped by to ask how he'd known, he always gave the same quiet answer. I didn't know.